Hello.
Francesco, how good to
Hi.
see you.
It's very good to see you, Richard. And what a
Yeah.
lovely Amsterdam sky you have.
Well, it's not raining, which is a good thing.
Yes.
It's an unusual thing, but how are you doing? How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. You see, my hair keeps growing, so I guess
Yeah,
I'm doing good.
I had a pretty bad haircut the other day, but anyway, never mind. Never mind.
So Joseph, huh? With the Technicolor.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
what a great way to
yeah,
start. And
yeah.
actually, it's funny. I mean, this topic is such a brilliant topic, and there are some a couple of more old movies of Joseph, and even Miles and myself were involved in productions of this when we were in our younger days, and I'm talking when I was 10 or 11. So it's just the most amazing story, and it's this great way to start this series of looking into Handel's heroes and villains alongside your expertise in the real stuff.
Well, Handel's music is just fantastic. So anything we play, we listen, we research is just a joy for our ears and our hearts. And as you were saying, as Courtney was saying, introducing us, yeah, we're kind of focusing on the biblical heroes and villains of his oratorios. And oratorios are a very interesting genre seen from the perspective of the interaction between Jews and music, and especially the idea we have of thinking about, oh, here is a very nice coat of many colors. It's Joseph is an ambiguous story, but every biblical story is so full of little details. And I was saying oratorios from the vantage point of the theme of Jews and music is particularly interesting because they're biblical commentaries. And biblical commentaries, whether in music, on stage or semi-staged or just on paper, need to resolve lexical and logical conflict. Hence, the coat of many colors, which in the Bible is two words that can mean all kinds of things. And there are many of these words in the story of Joseph, by the way. So there's a lot of ambiguity. So lexical, logical conflicts, and also fill in the narrative gaps. In our case, we start with Joseph. It's a very full narrative, and yet there are inconsistencies or things that are not fully making sense. And that there is a long tradition of rabbinic writing trying to resolve lexical issues and to fill in narrative gaps. What's interesting to us is that some of this literature was translated or was circulating across Europe in the time we're looking at, in the 1600s, 1700s, was a time of, as we've seen, of a lot of exchanges and exchanges of ideas between various communities, and especially Jews and Christians in Europe. And so listening and tuning into Handel's heroes and villains with a little bit of background from this lore and this shared tradition, we can maybe rethink characters, roles, pathos, and really rethink the music a little bit together.
Well, it gives it a whole sort of backstory, or sort of as the actors would say, just the sort of subtext into the whole story.
Yeah, and in the case of Joseph, so we started with Joseph because it's just such a juicy story. It's one of the longest biographical narratives in the whole Bible. It goes on for many chapters of the book of Genesis. At some point, there's a little detour because after following Joseph, we learn about his brother Judah, but there is a reason, because Judah was the culprit of Joseph's misfortunes. So his misfortunes narrated there make sense within the global narrative. We learned so much about the characters of the Bible. We learn about the economy of Egypt in ancient times. And clearly it was a popular narrative, not just in Handel's time, but way before, to the point I picked Pontormo's illustration, part of a series. He collaborated with other artists, to the point that the nobility of Florence would have paintings with the various segments of the story of Joseph in their bedroom. Right now, these paintings ended up, for some reason, at the National Gallery in London, but they used to be in somebody's bedroom in Florence, not far from the Arno River. So you'll explain that to me some other time, Richard.
I resign. Yes.
But it's a story. It's a story that's so full of details, and at the same time, it's also can be seen today as a sort of a story of successful immigration. It's Joseph is an immigrant because of the way he's betrayed by his brothers, ends up in a foreign land, and in that foreign land he will succeed and contribute and do great things. But it's not like maybe like today's migration stories also includes human trafficking and abuse. So there is a lot there. What's interesting that once he made it into Handel's oratorio, some of the more controversial parts were sort of put to the side, but our job is to kind of tease them out or think about how such a popular story was really in the ears and minds of the viewers of the time, and how we can bring that type of engagement with this biblical narratives back. And so, yes, it's very much at the core of what we're doing with Jews and music. And Joseph and his own ambiguity are very much represented in Handel's music. Is Joseph a contratenor? Is Joseph a what voice is? How is Joseph's voice, Richard?
Well, this is a really important part of this oratorio. It's the first major role for a countertenor in Handel's oratorio output. In earlier, for instance, in Saul, the role had only been taken on by a countertenor because the illness of the great Marquesini, and thereafter Handel only ever entrusted that role to a female singer. So the countertenor voice as a solo voice was this is the first real appearance of it. So that's, again, that could lend depth to the idea that Joseph is an interesting and maybe not totally well defined character, or sort of in that
he's a character
sense.
Of many colors.
Exactly, yes. So that's a very interesting point about this oratorio.
Maybe we can listen to Joseph. We're sort of at the beginning of the whole narrative, right? So and these beautifully prepared recordings that will accompany us today. So we start with some music.
Come, divine inspirer, come. Come, divine inspirer, come. Make my humble breast thy home. Make my humble breast thy home. Draw the curtain from mine eye, and present place futurity, and present place futurity. Come, divine inspirer, come. Come, come. Come, come. Come, divine inspirer, come. Come, come. Make my humble breast thy home. Draw the curtain from mine eye. Draw the curtain from mine eye. And present place futurity. And place futurity. And present place futurity. And present place futurity. Thus was thy old fellow's dream, bright interpretation beam. Pharaoh's self shall temples raise, and Egypt incense to thy praise, to thy praise. Egypt incense to thy praise, to thy praise. And Egypt incense to thy praise. Come, divine inspirer, come, divine inspirer, come, make my humble breast thy home, make my humble breast thy home, draw the curtain from mine eye, and present place futurity, and present place futurity. Come, divine inspirer, come, 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 divine inspirer, come, 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 make my humble breast thy home, draw the curtain from mine eye, draw the curtain from mine eye, and present place futurity, and present place futurity, and present place futurity, and present place futurity.
Glorious stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful.
So we're at the beginning, pretty much at the beginning of the oratorio. Joseph is sitting in jail, and in a way, his whole story has happened, but we didn't know if we were just listening to the music or being in the hall and being exposed to Handel's oratorio. And the story begins way ahead. As a young man, Joseph, and we kind of know the story. We've heard it before, but he's a brat, and he exposes his brothers. They throw him in a pit, and they sell him to human traffickers that take him to Egypt. In Egypt, he will, well, we're going to deal with that in a second, but he's attacked by an older woman. He ends up in jail. He interprets dreams, and in fact, he will later on receive a name that's mentioned in the libretto that rabbis think means more or less seers of future, seers of dreams. So he's really a dream interpreter, and it's an interesting story because God is not featured too often. For being the book of Genesis, God is relatively absent, relatively hands-off in what's going on in this whole narrative. Here are some sources. Passover is starting tomorrow night. I figured that seeing Joseph interpreting dreams and then ruling over his brothers and the illustrations of the Passover, Sarajevo Passover Haggadah would be a good reminder of how popular the story is. But the story has a whole life in the Judeo-Islamic world, and that's on the right of what we see on screen right now is an example of a Persian manuscript. It's written in Judeo-Persian, so it's Hebrew, but it's Persian in Hebrew letters. And again, Joseph is interpreting dreams in this case as well, and it's really a beloved character to the point that he becomes, for his overall role as a patriarch in the biblical story. He becomes also the bearer of good luck, or at least protection against evil fortune. I think we have another slide with a document from the Magnus collection at UC Berkeley, and this is a story of Esther, written on the manuscript, but it's inscribed with a blessing from the Bible. It's Jacob's blessing to Joseph before his death. And here too, not just this Technicolor coat is prone to multiple interpretations. The quotation Ben Porat Yosef may mean in Hebrew either that he's a fruitful vine or that Joseph is a wild ass. Go figure how the Bible works. So we find Joseph in jail, and as I was saying, everything has already happened, and then he will almost immediately fall in love or be loved by the female character we're about to introduce it, by Asenat. By the way, her name is very current in modern Hebrew. It's the name Osnat is a very common first name. So there are a lot of women, young women called Osnat these days. So it's a story that's very present in all kinds of ways. And the part that's really missing in the oratorio, we can understand why, from the point of view of like sacred narratives, is the seduction on the part of the wife of Potiphar. And Potiphar re-enters the scene. Here she is in a beautiful Tintoretto rendering. Eventually she will pull his coat. It's probably not the coat of many colors. She pulls it and uses a proof that he tried to rape her. It's not true, and that's why he ends up in jail. But it's a foundational moment in the narrative, hidden in Handel's libretto. But the whole theme of love, in a way, comes out of as redemptive from this story that we don't really hear in Handel. And so for this, I thought maybe we could integrate it in different ways. Let's just look at how this moment that precedes what the action of Handel is, how it's really constructed through sources that were circulating at the time and that people knew. So in other words, they could imagine this scene without even seeing or hearing it in the oratorio. We have another slide coming up with, this is just the scene right before what we heard Joseph singing, and he's singing "Defer my soul." He's talking about being a shackle captive, and he's saying he's wondering whether being in jail is really the just rewards of stubborn virtue, meaning there is a direct reference to the fact that he had resisted the advances of the wife of Potiphar, which is narrated in Genesis. We see it on the right side of the screen, Genesis 39. And Joseph is introduced as well-built and handsome. He's a very good-looking lad. And these are the words of the Bible. And after a time, his wife, the master's wife, cast her eye upon him and said, "Lie with me." At this point, a very interesting narrative, that of the Sefer HaYashar, we have a slide with that, kicks in. And this is a midrash, it's a commentary, but it's also perhaps a forgery. It was printed in Venice in 1544, and supposed to originate from a book printed in Naples that nobody ever found. Most likely was the result of a Jewish immigrant from the Iberian Peninsula to Italy, who cobbled together Jewish and Islamic sources and tells, and this is just a segment, and then this narrative was translated from Hebrew into Latin, was circulating across Europe, and then eventually will be translated into English, and comes all the way to Utah to inform the biblical imagination of the Church of Latter-day Saint. And but here it is. So in this case, Potiphar's wife has a name. Her name is Zuleika, and she's very active in trying to seduce Joseph. And at some point in the story, she even exposes Joseph to all of her girlfriends. She brings her girlfriends into her home. And basically what is described here is that the minute Joseph walks in with these beautiful garments that he's wearing, that he continues to wear, all of these women's jaws drop. And not only drop, but she's a wicked character. She gives them oranges to peel. And instead of peeling the oranges, all these women cut their hands and bleed and don't realize they're bleeding because they're so taken by the beauty of Joseph that they don't bleed. What this whole thing is about is really also in a way, a biblical and post-biblical rumination about the encounter of cultures. So that's another way in which the oratorio works quite well. It's really the encounter of different cultures. And I pulled up from my own bag of tricks a song, and we have it coming up right now, a song from Morocco, a Jewish song from Morocco that is bilingual. It's Hebrew and Arabic. And here we see on this slide also when the book of Yasher, the story that augments the narrative, was published in Salt Lake City, 1887. But what we're listening to right now, in just a second, is a version by Estikenan Ofri, which is an amazing Israeli singer. She was a muse of Luciano Berio. She's a very interesting performer and composer from Israel, born in Rome, by the way. So Estikenan is singing this traditional Moroccan song, which is bilingual in Hebrew and Arabic. When it's in Arabic, it's Potiphar's wife trying to seduce Joseph. So Arabic is the language of seduction. And Joseph answers back in Hebrew saying, "No way, stay away from me. I don't want to be with you, old lady."
وجهك يا ذاك الرواح حين قلت له يا يوسف اجل عندي في الدهور ونقم لك سنية باتاي والكس دور ذهب اللي في المصر
So many languages, many cultures come into this story. But this narrative and this encounter and clash of cultures and this episode of seduction were very much in the minds and hearts of those who were listening to Handel's music. So I'm not arguing, I'm not advocating that the sound of the oud was part of Handel's repertoire, even though it seems like Philharmonia Baroque is now bringing the oud back into this equation. So who knows what will happen next. But the seduction is not there, it's only hinted at. Yeah. And instead, Joseph ends up marrying Potiphar's, and according to the rabbis, actually the same character, the steward Potiphar and Potipharah, the father of Asenath, are the one and the same person. The only interesting thing in the rabbinic literature is that Asenath could actually be a member of the tribe. One of the theories is that she was adopted by her father, and she was actually and related to Joseph. It was the daughter of Dinah, born out of the rape of Dinah, the sister of the 12 brothers. So everybody's somewhat connected in the backstory here. Anyway, that's the whole point of the oratorio. What we hear stage and what we hear in the libretto is just one part of the story. And it's an invitation for everyone to fill in the gaps and bring in other sources to do so. So now I guess we can hear Asenath and in the beautiful rendition of Sherazad Pantaki.
Yeah, well, this comes after the dream has been interpreted. I must say it's I always find it fascinating how Handel uses keys. The overture just before we hear this is it's very interesting to see how Handel sets up an oratorio, what kind of music he presents, and the symphony, the opening block of music is a massive piece of music, a bit like in Saul. It's a big four-section sinfonia, which starts in a very, very serious and passion-related key of E minor, just like Messiah did. And then we have the whole interpretation of the dream by Joseph, which is just fantastic. I mean, it's so colorful the way that Handel deals with that, and the sort of magic music as the interpretation is given, and at which Pharaoh is rather impressed and makes him governor of the whole place. And the final recitative, where Pharaoh makes Joseph in charge of the country, as he says, the keys there we go quite flat, and it's quite dramatic. And then Asenath, who's obviously on the sideline and sees Joseph and has the same reaction as all of these ladies to Joseph did in the first place. She's obviously totally smitten and jaw open and drooling. And we have this amazing aria, "O Lovely Youth," in the key of E major, which, having come from E minor, and E major is a very interesting key with Handel. It's often very sweet, very oversweet sometimes, loving, flattering, and she obviously is just utterly smitten. So let's hear this wonderful aria, "O Lovely Youth."
What breast so firm was ever found as could resist such grace? As could resist such grace? What breast so firm was ever found? What breast so firm was ever found as could resist? As could resist? As could resist such grace? What breast so firm was ever found as could resist? As could resist such grace?
Utterly ravishing. Utterly ravishing. Beautiful singing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. How could you resist that? But funnily enough, in the way Handel sets the following scene with Joseph and Asenath, he sets Joseph's response to all that in a very unsexual way, unemotional way. And Pharaoh decides to offer, well, apart from giving him the name Zaphnath, he offers her hand in marriage to Joseph, which is of course accepted. But the way that Joseph is written is very sort of formal, and they have a very formal duet together in G major, which is the sort of flip side of the way the piece started in E minor. Joseph says he of course that he wants the union to help allay the anxious toils of grandeur and smooth the rugged brow of public care. This excuse he uses also later on. And then of course to end the first act, we have a sort of Hollywood epic with the trumpets coming in with this great march, which would not be out of place in Ben-Hur or Spartacus from the 60s movie. And then Pharaoh has a sort of typical showpiece aria, which was written for Reinhold, Handel's great bass at the time. And that's how the first act ends. And then we have another hole in the plot, which we have to fill in, which the audience has to fill in, which is when Joseph tells the brothers to go and fetch the young brother who's not with them, leaving Simeon behind as a sort of hostage, if you like. And we start Act 2.
Well, one of the reasons we have these gaps in the plot of the oratorio is that they couldn't stage 12 brothers plus parents and other relatives. They had to shrink it a little bit. So
absolutely. But it's kind of interesting to see that the bits that are missed out. That's kind of a good juicy plot twist. It helps. But the second act begins with sort of a general admiration of what Joseph has achieved. But Asenath knows that something is bothering Joseph. Maybe he's homesick, and she talks about only babies bringing a smile. So she's obviously ready to procreate. And she has a wonderful aria in A major, which again is even as a precursor to the Mozart. Mozart always used the key of A major to sort of promote the idea of love in some way, human love. And she, in that aria, there's a lovely bit of reported speech from Joseph where she says that is saying that in human brethren, O unhappy father, what anguish too much love for me has cost thee. So it's very interesting, sort of from that aria with the reported speech from Joseph. Joseph doesn't actually get to say it himself. And then we have this extraordinary scene of Simeon in prison, being visited and taunted, and the knife being dug in by Joseph. So we can hear a bit of how Simeon is feeling in prison with the aria, remorse, confusion, horror, fear from Simeon.
Remorse, confusion, horror, fear, the vultures of her guilty breast, of her guilty breast. Remorse, confusion, horror, the vultures, fear, confusion, the vultures of the guilty breast. Now, Fiona's, now, she feels you here, she feels you here, who know most, who know most, who are most distressed. Now, Fiona's, the vultures of the guilty breast. She feels you here, she feels you here, who know most, who know most, who and most, who and most distressed.
A lovely snapshot of Simeon's self-tormenting in prison. After which we see Joseph with Fanor, who Benjamin has arrived, and Joseph sings a wonderful sort of contemplative aria about sort of looking at his lot. He sort of longing in a way for the simplicity of the life he used to have. It's a beautiful aria. The peasant tastes the sweets of life, unwounded by its cares. No courtly craft, no public strife, his humble soul ensnares. And it's also interesting, again, the way that Handel uses keys. This is set in C major, very simple peasant key and in pastoral rhythms in C major. And we'll see a little bit later when Benjamin appears that is, again, that simplicity and purity is referenced just by the use of C major in the work. But this is this lovely aria from Joseph.
His humble soul public strife. His humble soul ensnares his humble soul, his humble soul. No courtly craft, no public strife, his humble soul ensnares his humble soul ensnares. But grandeurs, bulky, noisy joys, no true contentment give, no true contentment give, whilst fancy craves, possession cloys, we die thus whilst we live. But grandeurs, bulky, noisy joys, no true contentment give, no true contentment give, what fancy craves, possession cloys, we die thus whilst we live, we die whilst we live. The peasant tastes the sweets of life, unwounded by its care. The peasant tastes the sweets of life, unwounded by its cares. No courtly craft, no public strife, his humble soul ensnares his humble soul, his humble soul. No courtly craft, no public strife, his humble soul ensnares. Unwounded by its cares, unwounded by its cares, the peasant tastes the sweets of life, unwounded by its cares. The peasant tastes the sweets of life, unwounded by its cares. No public strife, no courtly craft, his humble soul ensnares his humble soul, his humble soul. No courtly craft, no public strife, his humble soul ensnares.
So clever. I mean, that really, that whole sound, that pastoral quality, that really roots, and also the key, that roots in your ear because it's such a substantial aria, and it's really important for the development of this next little bit, because then there's an exchange between Simeon and Joseph in prison, where, as I say, Joseph kind of turns the knife and puts pressure on Simeon, and Simeon lies about the way Joseph's death, the circumstances of Joseph's death. Simeon says, wild beasts devoured him. But Joseph says that he can see the truth. In vain for me you'd hide the truth, imposter, which spawns this following aria, little aria from Simeon, where he's almost in a panic, and it's having got that cleanliness of C major, we have this very sort of forcefully dramatic C minor explosion from Simeon.
Imposter. Admits of no defense. Ah, my foul offense wrote in my face. Oh, dire disgrace. Admits of no defense. Admits of no defense. Ah, my foul offense wrote in my face. Oh, dire disgrace. Admits of no defense. Treacherous hearts from mortal sight may veil a while their impious sky, and sings and brings dark deeds to light, and sings and brings dark deeds to light. Foul offense wrote in my face. Oh, dire disgrace. Admits of no defense. Admits of no defense. Ah, my foul offense admits of no defense.
It's just that change is so tortured. It's so tortured. After that, there's this little scene of Asenath sort of having a bit of empathic response to Joseph. She's definitely got the bit between her teeth about what's bugging him. At which point, that is interrupted by the return of the brothers with Benjamin, and there's a sort of scene with the brothers. There's an aria for Judah in B flat, which expresses a certain amount of optimism about what's going to come, and then there's a sort of brothers chorus with lots of pleading and groveling in keys which are all over the place, and then suddenly, with all this sort of friction and worry and almost neuroticism, Benjamin speaks, and suddenly the rest becomes very stable and very quiet, and the word "and" in C major, where the words "this kiss, my gracious Lord, comes washed with tears. Oh, save my country, save my dear, dear father, and may Abraham's God forever save my soul," which just moves Joseph so much to hear about his father and Benjamin's simple pleading on behalf of his father and his country. And Joseph is very moved, and he calls Benjamin "my son," which is such an exquisite moment. And this also, what's really important to realize is that Handel wrote Benjamin's role for a boy soprano. Now it's extraordinary because it's a very difficult role, and you can make of that what you will. But that innocence, that's sort of slightly more childlike quality of the character for Benjamin. I know I'm just aware of time, so just moving on.
Well, it's a long story, Richard. You know what we did not mention is that it does end well.
It does end well, absolutely.
The dysfunctional family comes back together.
Yeah,
and the power couple is celebrated in all kinds of ways, which goes back to the fact Asenath has a very small role in the biblical story, but she actually has a great role in the overall economy of the Bible, because she would give birth to 2 of the tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel. So this celebration in Handel makes perfect sense from that point of view.
Yeah,
that's how we close, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the last piece we're going to hear is after Asenath has finally been told the whole story by Joseph, and there's a sort of air of prophetic rapture. It says it all, really. This extraordinary aria from Asenath, sort of celebrating her knowledge of what's going on, and that everything's going to be okay in the end.
gloom, this black gloom shall break away. That this black gloom shall break away, and leave more heavenly bright the day, and leave more heavenly bright the day.
Wow.
Richard, here is where our jaws drop.
I know, absolutely, absolutely. What, there's not much to say after that, really.
No. We know this oratorio, which has had its own vicissitudes, is actually squarely belonging into our interests and concerns and repertoire. So we're delighted to highlight it today and to start off our series of chats about Handel's biblical heroes and villains with Joseph, a story that doesn't really have too many villains, or at least the villains are redeemed, but we'll get into nastier things as we move
Yes,
along,
we
right?
certainly will. It's been a great pleasure. I mean, fantastic stuff, Francesco. Really, so fascinating.
Likewise, we're so lucky. And thank you to everybody who's been tuning in. Hi, Miles. Thank you, Miles,
Hi, my
for
jaw
making
is
this
on
happen.
the floor. Oh, such fantastic music making. And thanks so much again to Diana, Sherry, Nick, along with Lawrence, David, and Bob. Holy cow. What a fantastic program. And Richard and Francesco, you play off each other so well, and you each bring such knowledge and insight to these discussions. And I cannot thank you enough. They're always just so incredible and so incredibly insightful. So I'm really looking forward to continuing on our journey of heroes and villains.
So are we. So are we.
Of course. And Richard, since you brought it up, I must give a shout out to the 2003 high school production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat in Richmond, Virginia.
And the 1971 production of Joseph from the York Minster Song School.
Oh, well, I also do have to mention that as we mentioned before, there is a recording of Joseph and His Brethren that we recorded. We performed it in 2017, recorded it in 2018 with the lovely guest artists that you got to listen to today. So it's available wherever you hear music. So feel free to download it today.
Richard, Francesca, thank you so much. What a fantastic morning, and what an illuminating discussion, and the performances were just incredible. Thank you. Jews in Music, again, 5.5 years running. We never could have imagined, and together you are really taking us on a wonderful journey of discovery. I want to thank the Correct Foundation again, and everybody who tuned in today. We love having you. Please support our work. Have a wonderful holiday if you celebrate Passover and Easter. Happy holidays to you, and can't wait to see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Until next time.
Good night.
Bye. Good night, Richard.
Good night, Francesco. Bye-bye.
Bye.